Lest I be a castaway. Chapter 11. The dancing, shouting cowboy. Shepherd of love. Brother Willie, Part 2. Continued from a wade in the water. The moment the music started at church, he was on the floor dancing and twirling. He was always quite a spectacle. April 3rd, 1974. The ambulance rang out racing down our street. I ran outside, following it to a home nearby. As the neighbors gathered, I saw my friend James standing there outside of his home, trembling and crying. Immediately I heard the Spirit of God say to me, "Pray for him. He's going to need it." Something bad had just happened at his house. His mother was nearby and relatives were running swiftly to the rescue. The ambulance and police department had arrived. Then came the fire units. Some were already inside the house. Tape and restrictive boundaries were going up as we all stood watching. I lived just around the corner and walked past this house often. They were a very popular family amongst the church groups. The police were exiting the house with Willie, the older brother of James, handcuffed. He was jumping repeatedly, dancing as they held him under both arms. He was doing what they call the holy dance. He was shouting praises to God and looking up into the air, giving thanks. He was covered in blood from head to toe. What I could clearly see, and it held my focus, was his white cowboy-style boots, smeared in blood, and a fancy belt. I recalled how he often dressed in full Western attire with hat included. He looked like a shouting, dancing cowboy. People were crying and screaming, "Elder Barnett is dead. He killed him." Bakersfield, California, April 10th, 1974, Wednesday, page 10. Hearing set in death of stepfather. Willie S. Farrell, 24, also known as Shepherd Love, wore leg irons and no shoes for his Tuesday arraignment before a municipal court judge on a charge of murdering his stepfather on April the 3rd. The preliminary hearing was set for April 18th. The judge appointed the public defender to represent Farrell, reportedly found by Bakersfield police while kicking Douglas Barnett, 47, in the face and head at the residence they shared with the mother of the accused. A coroner's inquest was scheduled into the death of Elder Barnett of the Open Door Church. According to the autopsy report, Barnett suffered massive head injuries, including numerous fractures of the skull and bones in the lower front facial area. Investigators reported finding the suspect standing above the victim with blood on his hands, clothing, and white shoes. The coroner found, following testimony at the hearing, the death of Douglas Barnett, 47-year-old, was at the hands of another by other than accident. Farrell, 24, was in custody in connection with the death of Barnett in their residence. The coroner's pathologist also testified Barnett died of multiple head fractures. The arresting officer also testified in the inquest. He said he was investigating a report about 3:32 p.m. of a stabbing. As he passed the ambulance, two men in a car waved him down. There was a crowd gathering outside the house, and he joined the ambulance attendants as they entered the house and into the living room. He said he saw a man lying on the floor and Pharaoh standing with his feet in front of the man's face. The officer said Pharaoh was using profane language, telling him to get away and insisting he meant what he said. He was standing over the victim and kicking the man in the face with the heels of his shoes. The officer said when he attempted to talk to Pharaoh, the officer said Pharaoh kept ordering him to stay away or he would whip him. The officer testified Pharaoh was violent and communication with him was impossible. So the officer said he maced him in the face. An ambulance attendant helped handcuff the man. The officer described the room as in disarray. Blood was spattered on the wall above the couch, on the floor in front of the stereo set, on carpeting, and on the telephone cord. A table and lamps were turned over, and what appeared to be blood stains on furniture. Pharaoh's hands and clothing were covered in blood. The officer said Pharaoh was wearing ankle-high, zipper-type shoes with medium-sized heels. Barnett appeared dead. At the inquest, Pharaoh had a chain around his waist anchored to handcuffs and did not testify. He was represented at the hearing by a deputy public defender. Another witness who testified was James Jordan, 21, Pharaoh's half-brother and stepson of the victim, who lives at the same address. He said he wasn't going to testify against his brother, but the deputy coroner told him he had to answer questions. Jordan said he heard no argument and saw no fight between Barnett and Pharaoh when he left the house that morning. He returned shortly after 3 p.m. and saw his stepfather lying on the floor and Pharaoh on his knees nearby. Jordan said he told a police officer later that Pharaoh said to him, "Come get yours." He didn't know what Pharaoh meant by the remark, he said. There was blood all over the room, and Jordan said he did not believe his stepfather was alive. He went to his grandmother's house, was gone 4 or 5 minutes, and when he returned home with his cousin, he said, "My brother was rolling on the floor. He had blood all on him," the witness said. Jordan and his cousin left the house and were driving away when they saw the police. When they returned to the house, the ambulance had arrived. He said he didn't know what happened while he was away from the house. Another detective testified and described overturned furniture and the blood-spattered room with the victim lying on his back. He quoted an ambulance driver who said while he and his partner were attempting to get a gurney into the room, Pharaoh told them to stay away. September 8, 1974. Pharaoh, suspect in the April 3rd stomping death of his stepfather, has pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter. During the preliminary hearing, the Kern County pathologist testified Barnett died of multiple head fractures. September 28, 1974, Saturday, the Bakersfield, California newspaper says, a diagnostic study is due in the death. A 90-day diagnostic study at Chino State Prison has been ordered by a Superior Court judge for Willie Shepard Farrell, 24, who pleaded guilty in the April 3rd stomping death of his father, Douglas Barnett, 47. Pharaoh, also known as Shepherd Pharaoh Love, changed his guilty plea to involuntary manslaughter on September the 4th. He was now represented by an attorney. No one really knows what happens behind our closed doors. They can only speculate. The members of the family know the truth of the situation. Some say that the sons of this household were terribly mistreated. Others say the father mistreated their mother. Those with personal contacts to the family say that Willie had simply had enough and snapped. There was something going on, hidden and tucked away out of sight. I often wondered if Willie knew his father was cheating and carousing on his mother and decided to put an end to it all of his sneakiness and deception. The circumstances surrounding Willie's arrest became old news, and things went silent for many years. He was eventually released and lived a fairly quiet life. It is believed that while listening to music on the radio years later, Willie had a seizure and knocked the radio into the tub. He was found electrocuted to death. I was reading an article by Jennifer Paris about the effect of infidelity on children, even grown children, and I share a bit. Cheating can be devastating to any relationship. But what happens when you have kids together? Even if you and your partner decide to work out your issues, if your child somehow finds out about the affair, it can make things even messier. If you're wondering about the effects infidelity has on your kids, you might be surprised and relieved to know that it's not all doom and gloom if you handle it the right way. Everyone in a family is affected by an affair in one way or another. Whether it's seeing the parent who was cheated on angry and upset, or seeing the cheating partner feeling guilty. It's important to keep in mind that these are big emotions for everyone. And while cheating might feel like a death blow to a relationship, whether you decide to stay together or not, you're still going to have to work out some very real and raw feelings that your child might be having. Even though it might seem like there's no relationship rebound from an affair, it's important to keep in mind that even in the middle of such a mess, your role is that of a parent. After all, your child's needs come first. So be sure to put your child's emotional well-being first as you forge ahead with your life, and understand the ramifications when infidelity makes its way into a relationship, so that you can help your child handle their own emotions. Infidelity can have a detrimental psychological effect on kids or youth and lead to a dysfunctional family, which can then disrupt their life and hamper their potential. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. Sometimes we set ourselves on a path of destruction. Clergy receive many warnings from the Spirit of God to correct our situations and repent. God is a forgiving God and continues to call us to spare us from destruction and to cover and protect our lives. Chapter 11, Castaway. The shouting, dancing cowboy. The shepherd of love. To be continued. The dancing, shouting cowboy, part 3. She's a church girl.